There's a lot of people that are out there, they're questioning whether or not they can really be forgiven because they've done a lot of things. Today on the Midweek Move, we're going to talk about that. Hello and welcome to Midweek Move, podcast stitch in the healing place, the podcast where we examine the scriptures line by line, verse by verse, and ask ourselves what is happening here today. Ladies and gentlemen, as we continue the weekly shorts, I am joined with Jillian. Hey.
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you enjoying the film school we've been doing?
Oh, it's been really fun.
Yeah, what's the best part so far?
I like editing a lot.
You like editing? That's a fun process. What was the weirdest thing you learned about editing?
That it's very tedious, and you really need to memorize each scene and how you can make it play into one.
Yeah, definitely. Very cool. Well, I'm glad you're enjoying it. So today, though, we're getting into the scriptures. We're doing Luke chapter 7, verse 36 through 50. And again, the last couple of weeks, we've been talking about a lot of things. Last week, we talked with Rylan. Brought really great thoughts about, don't make excuses. To hide from the truth and dealing with it. And before that, we talked with Kinsley about dealing with the, what's the word I'm looking for? Creating an atmosphere where people can ask questions. And that is really interesting because it kind of plays into today's conversation. Because not only are people afraid to ask questions sometimes, but sometimes they feel they're afraid to talk about maybe their struggles. And they feel like they've done too much. And we're going to jump into, we're in verse 36 of Luke chapter 7. And jumping into it, here we see Jesus, and one of the Pharisees is inviting him over for dinner. And they're like, hey, Jesus, come hang out. We're going to have dinner together. And this is a big deal because, again, to date, the Pharisees haven't been the friendliest toward Jesus.
Maybe not.
They've tried to set him up. They're doing some stuff. And so, picking up here, there's a woman who shows up. Verse 7, 37. Behold, a woman of the city who was a sinner. When she learned that he was reclining at the table of the Pharisee's house, brought an alabaster flask of ointment, and standing behind him at his feet, weeping, she began to wet his feet with her tears and wiped them with her hair and on her head, and she kissed his feet and anointed them with ointment. Now, when the Pharisees who had invited him saw this, he said to himself, if this man were a prophet, he would have known who and what sort of woman this is who's touching him, for she is a sinner. So this is a big ordeal. Now, first off, as a rabbi, they're supposed to there's certain rules about what they can do, who they can't do, who they can be around. By saying that she's a sinner, we know that she's a sinner, she's doing something inappropriate, but something specifically makes her so unclean that ceremonially Jesus couldn't even touch her because then he would be unclean too. So this guy, he's calling out Jesus like, how could you be around even this dreadful, terrible woman? Now, he says it to himself. So either he thought it in his head and Jesus is just could tell, or maybe he's muttering. We're not really sure about the situation, right? So it goes on, and Jesus, he doesn't even talk to the guy. It's like he's answering this guy's question. He's calling the guy out by talking to somebody else in the room. He's like, hey, Simon. He's like, got a question for you, Simon. And so Jesus lays out this situation about a moneylender, and he has two debtors, two people he owes money to. One owed two people owed him money. I apologize. One owed 500, and another one owed 50. And picking up verse 42, when they could not pay, he canceled the debt of both. Now, which of them will love him more? And so Simon, he's thinking about it, he's like, well, the guy that owed more money probably loves him better because he was forgiven a lot, right? And so we come back down here to verse 45. Jesus calling out this guy. He's calling out the fact that this lady came in and she greeted him with appropriately. She washed his feet. She anointed him, all this other stuff. And then verse 47, therefore I tell you, her sins, which are many, are forgiven, for she loved much. And he who is forgiven little loves little. And he said to her, your sins are forgiven. So he's like, look, this woman, she's given everything. She genuinely has cared for it. She has a lot on her plate. And even though she has all the stuff that could, because again, sin kind of holds us back, keeps us from doing stuff. Jesus says, you're forgiven. She loved Jesus a lot, and he had forgiven her quite a bit there. So again, I have a couple questions for you here.
Hey. Okay.
All right. So some feel that they have done too much to be forgiven. What does this verse tell us about that idea?
Well, I believe this verse speaks to that idea because it shows that no matter how big or small the sin may be, that God is willing to forgive as long as you have faith and continue on. Because as it says here in Luke 7:50, and he said to the woman, "Thy faith saved thee. Go in peace."
Yeah, absolutely. That's good. Again, that's the whole aspect of it is our faith that saves us. It's not our works. It's not that she did anything specific. Like it wasn't the alabaster jar thing. It was the putting her trust in Jesus. Again, we talked about him a second ago. She wasn't even supposed to be touching him, period.
Yeah.
Just ceremonially, there were certain rules, period, not supposed to be around him. And yet she did because she had faith that something would happen. She was giving herself to him. And so, like you said, in verse 50, your faith has saved you. Go in peace. He swipes it away. So, next question. The passage tells us, what does the passage tell us about how we should treat people? Because, again, this is Jesus treating her. But if we're called to be Christ-like, because Christian means to be Christ-like,
Yeah.
how should we treat people who we know have lived a sinful lifestyle? They've done some terrible things, possibly. How should we respond to those people? How should we treat them?
Well, I believe this passage gives us clear instructions of how to forgive those that have sinned against us. It says to forgive those. So after this, because God has forgiven all of our wrongdoings, who are we to not forgive those?
Right.
So it says in verse Luke 7:48, and he said unto her, "Thy sins are forgiven." So if the creator of the universe is willing to sin, like forgive all the sin that this woman has caused, no matter what the sin may be,
Right.
why can't we do the same?
Word.
So we hold people to such a level that we can't even hold ourselves to.
Right.
So if we can't hold ourselves to it, why can we hold other people to it? Shouldn't we be more in reality of how we should be since we are Christ-like instead of blaming other people? So if we forgive those, we are being more Christ-like.
Absolutely.
So when we forgive those, they think, wow, they have the amount of capacity to forgive me even though I've done all these things against them. Yet, so how can they do that? That is how we can be a light with Jesus. We can refer him back since he has forgiven many, many, many people.
Right.
Even though they put him to a cross, he has forgiven them.
Right.
He did this all for us, so we have to always point back with our actions.
Yeah.
So we have to take each action to account because Jesus made every action that he made in the Bible count.
Yeah, absolutely. That's good stuff. I like it. That was a lot more than I was expecting, and I'm really proud of you because that's so much. Again, when we look at people, you brought up there's something specifically you said is that we tend to hold people to a standard that we won't hold ourselves to, and that's a real struggle. That's a problem that we have. There's a lot of reasons why people don't like Christians, and one of them is sometimes there have been some Christians that have been like, "You're terrible," and they're hiding their own junk.
Yeah.
We talked about several weeks on our show about the fact that we're saved is a miracle in of itself. Like nobody deserves salvation, period. Yet Jesus gives it to us. He makes it available to us. And so for us to look at a person who, man, maybe they're struggling with something different than what we did, but we still struggled with sin ourselves. Even people who were raised in church, and maybe they lived a good life, they were decent people, they were still saved by grace. And they are still no better and no worse than any other person that's out there who maybe they're still struggling. And I'm telling you right now, I've talked to many a person right now or in my life who they do not come to church because they feel like nobody will even give them a chance to see Jesus. The Jesus they've seen in people has been marred and scarred by people's poor actions because they don't. Jesus, he didn't. Woman walked in. He knew who she was. He knew her heart. He didn't go, "Hey, get out of here." He didn't do that. He's like, he knew what was happening.
And that's what I also love about the Lord. Like, he accepts anyone. So what I don't understand is why can't we as people accept people from different backgrounds, different circumstances, and different things that make them to where we say, oh, they're not welcomed here. Oh, they're not this, this, and this. Why can't we be more like Christ in that aspect?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, that's what we need to do. Now, I will put this caveat out there. There's a difference between accepting somebody into the house and going, hey, we're going to love you how you are, where you're at, But also, there is the standard of that the scriptures has for us. And we're supposed to help people walk that out and grow into what we call nobody's perfect. I've said this before several times. If anybody comes to you and they go, why aren't you perfect right now? Just walk away from them. Okay? I have zero grace for that kind of attitude. We're walking this out. We're all growing. We're all trying to become what God's called us to be. And it's a journey. All right? And if you've accepted Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, He has grace to help you to grow. And we should extend it to help other people grow also. So good stuff. Good conversation. I'm proud of you. Want to hear from you guys. How has this challenged you? How has it encouraged you? Reach out to us, mediahub@thbshreveport.com. See you next time.